CR 5052, State of Ohio versus Michael Jason Meade. Is there any further witnesses, or do we need to talk about the exhibits?
Correct, Your Honor. Subject to the submission of our exhibits, we would rest, Your Honor.
Okay. Do you want to rest in front of the jury when we bring them out?
Please.
Okay. What exhibits are you seeking to admit?
Go ahead, Ms.
Thank you, Your Honor. Defendant's Exhibit A, which is an FBI diagram of 3996 Estates Place. Defense Exhibit B.
Hold on. Any objection? No objection.
Defendant's Exhibit B, Your Honor, which is a picture of the kitchen.
That's a duplicate of what we no objection.
Defendant's Exhibit C, Your Honor, which is a picture of the hole in the kitchen.
Same situation.
Defendant's Exhibit D, Your Honor, which is a picture of Mr. Goodson with a gun in a vehicle that was identified by his grandmother.
And we do object to that.
Over the state's objection, I will admit it.
Defendant's Exhibit E, Your Honor, which is a screenshot of the video that Miss Sanford Jones took of Mr. Rosser standing in the kitchen.
No, we don't.
Defendant's Exhibit F, Your Honor, which is the prohibition against earphones as an exhibit from the Columbus City Code.
We object to that.
Who testified to that?
Ricky, Your Honor, that it was illegal to wear earphones in the city of Columbus.
Did you present that to him?
Yes, sir.
Over the state's objection, I will admit it.
Defendant's Exhibit G, Your Honor, which is a picture of the gun with cone number 9. I believe this is a duplicate also. Defendant's Exhibit L, Your Honor, which is a picture of the screen door. Defendant's Exhibit M, Your Honor, which is a picture of the side door
No
and
objection.
fence. Defendant's Exhibit N, Your Honor, which is a picture of the mesh in the door with the delineations that Miss Culia testified to.
No objection.
Defendant's Exhibit O, Your Honor, which is a closer up of that.
No objection.
Defendant's Exhibit P, Your Honor, which is the email from Culia talking about how they settled on a 45-degree angle.
Object to that.
What is that again?
It's an email, Your Honor, from Culia, who testified from the FBI, saying that they settled arbitrarily on a 45-degree angle with respect to the door and her trajectory measurements.
Over the state's objection, I will.
Your Honor, there was testimony about how they did that. I think the email is hearsay, inappropriately put into evidence to the jury.
Over the objection, I'll admit the,
Your Honor, Defendant's Exhibit Q, which is the stipulation that was in fact read into the record concerning small pain.
Your Honor, my understanding is we've just been giving the stipulations to the court reporter, and that they don't go back to the jury, read to the jury.
stipulations go back
Your Honor, Mr.
because they're admitted into evidence.
Mr. Merkel, I've had this discussion numerous times, and I advised him that in this court, you always send the stipulations back. That's why each time I ask them to mark the stipulation, because they go back to the jury, Your Honor.
Yeah, I send them back. That's the reason we type them up.
Okay?
Over the objection, it'll be admitted.
Thank you, Your Honor. Defendant's Exhibit R, which is a still shot of Mr. Meade in his tactical vest.
Quickly.
I think that's a duplicate of yours.
We don't have an objection to the photograph, Your Honor. There are, down at the bottom, it says RKBWC - Meade yells for medic. I think that should be redacted from this. That's not part of the.
Let me take a look at it. I don't know what.
don't know how that got on there.
I mean,
That's sent to us, Your Honor, from the government, from their. It's encrypted, we can't put anything on there. When it comes from you guys, we can't modify it.
why don't we cut that out? Because
Sure, I'm happy to, more than happy
with it,
Problem solved.
we can cover it up and then copy it. I think we have a color copier.
That, with
With
that
the-
redaction.
With that being covered up, I will admit.
Defendant's Exhibit T, which is, a picture of the shell casings outside of the fence.
No objection.
Defendant's Exhibit U, Your Honor, which is the CV of Kevin Davis.
We object to that, Your Honor.
That's not gonna go back.
And
I'll
then,
sustain your objection. Hold up. Let's do it.
Sorry.
I'll sustain that objection. That's not gonna go back.
and then Defendant's Exhibit Z, Your Honor, which are the unclipped, unenhanced videos of Carl and Ferris Road.
No objection.
All the, other than the CV, all the evidence will be admitted, all of them. And,
Your Honor, I don't know that I was marking I gave all the stipulations that we have read into the record to Jill. I don't believe we marked them with exhibit stickers, because
we can put whatever exhibit,
obviously, we would place those in the court's possession to go back to the jury. And then,
we'd put it on a joint exhibit, because both you guys stipulated to it.
And then, Your Honor, during the case, or the defendant's case, there were some state's exhibits that were identified and authenticated by the witnesses, so we would move to admit 3 exhibits.
What are they?
So, Your Honor, there are 3. First being State's Exhibit 27, which is a screenshot of a Google map of the state's place in Case Road.
No objection, Your Honor.
The next is State's Exhibit 28, which is a screenshot from body-worn camera footage of the scene.
No objection, Your Honor.
And then finally is State's Exhibit 31, which is a copy of State versus White, 142 Ohio State 3rd 277. This was discussed by the witness, Kevin Davis. We don't intend to send this back to the jury, but because of the examination by the witness of this, we wanted to include it in the record.
That's fine, but it's not gonna go back to the jury.
Understood, Your Honor. Thank you.
Anything else?
So, at this point in time, Your Honor, we would renew our motion for Rule 29, Your Honor. Basically, Your Honor, the cross-examination by the government, in our case in chief, Your Honor, failed to provide any evidence that reasonable minds would disagree of the burden that they have at this point in time, even viewed most favorably of light. Our witnesses were consistent, were credible, and confirmed everything that occurred, Your Honor. We would ask that you dismiss the 3 counts, as well as incorporating Ms. Stevens's original argument with regards to the mental elements again, and the Rule 29 dismissal, Your Honor.
Your Honor, we certainly would oppose the Rule 29 motion. I believe that there's more than enough evidence that's been presented to send this case to the jury, and we'd ask you to overrule their motion.
At this time, the court will deny the Rule 29 motion. And for the record, Christopher Corne will be permitted to testify as a rebuttal witness for the state. Mr. Corne came forward recently. The state notified the defense in an expedited manner. The trial was paused to allow the defense time to investigate and interview the new witness. The recess began on Thursday, February 8th, and ended today, February 13th. Do we need to put anything else on the record prior to bringing in the jury?
Just ask you to note our standing objection with regards to that ruling that we've gone over multiple times.
Yes.
Yes.
So noted.
Thank you.
Let's go get the jury. Philip putting those mids out now. Next trial, I'm going to stop that.
All rise.
Everyone can have a seat. Everyone have a good long weekend. Any further witnesses
No, Your Honor, at this time, the defense would rest.
and any rebuttal evidence?
We do, Your Honor.
Let me read into the record. Ladies and gentlemen, a separation of witness order was granted in this case. The purpose of a separation order is so that the witness cannot hear the testimony of other witnesses, review evidence admitted during the trial, and tailor their testimony accordingly. This case has gotten extensive news coverage and has been live streamed by the local news networks. The next witness the state of Ohio is calling and rebuttal came forward after watching portions of the testimony, viewing evidence, and watching news coverage. The witness posted and then deleted certain statements on social media concerning the case. The witness also deleted their Facebook account. You may consider these factors when determining this witness's credibility. You are the sole judges of the credibility of this witness, and you will determine the weight of the testimony. It is your duty to decide what testimony to believe and what testimony not to believe. You can call your next witness.
Before that, there is a stipulation.
Okay, you can.
Thank you, Your Honor. The parties have the following stipulation to read to the jury, and it goes as follows. The parties agree that State's Exhibit number 32 is an authentic copy of GPS location records of Christopher Corne's van on December 4th, 2020, kept in the ordinary course of business of Franklin Heating, Cooling, and Refrigeration. Thank you.
So,
Oh, okay. Little maze around here, you need to come around. You raise your right hand. You solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury your testimony in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Have a seat. Pull yourself up close to the microphone. You may inquire.
Thank you, Your Honor. Sir, I'll start by asking you to please say and spell your name.
Christopher Corne, it's Christopher, last name Corne, Corne.
What do you do for a living?
I'm HVAC,
Where do
heating
you
and,
work?
Franklin Heating, Cooling and Refrigeration,
Where is that company located?
Groveport, Ohio,
How long have you worked there?
10 years,
And what position do you have there?
service manager,
Have you held any other positions at Franklin Heating and Cooling?
just a regular service tech,
And how long were you a service tech there?
9 years,
So in the past year, that's when you became a service manager?
yes,
Do you use a company vehicle for your job?
yes.
What kind of vehicles does the company use for the work?
Most of our vehicles are vans.
Are they marked for the company?
Yes, they have our company logo on the side of them.
And were you working back on December 4th of 2020?
Yes.
And what were you doing that day?
I was running a service call on Case Road.
Was that the only service call you had, or were there other locations?
I had multiple locations that day.
Were you driving a company vehicle that day?
Yes.
What kind of vehicle was it?
2019 GMC Savannah.
Is that a van?
Yes.
I believe you mentioned just a few moments ago that you were working in the area of Case Road.
Case Road.
What time of day were you at that job site?
I would say between 11:30 and 12:05.
And is there tracking information that the company keeps of the vehicles and what you all are up to in your work?
Yes.
And are you familiar with those records and how they work?
A little bit, yes.
And are you familiar with the record of your work back on December 4th of 2020?
Yes.
Hold on one moment. All right. All right, thank you. May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
Sir, I'm going to hand you what's been marked for identification purposes as City Exhibit 33. Please take a look at that document and let me know when you're ready.
Yes.
Do you recognize that document?
Yes.
What is it?
It's my GPS log for the day of December 4th, 2020.
And what record does it have for this Case Road job site that you were describing a moment ago?
It shows I was there for a total of 27 minutes, and I believe I left that location at 12:07. I arrived at that location at 11:40.
Regarding the times, do you mean 11:40 a.m. you arrived there?
I did. I arrived there at 11:40 a.m. and left at 12:07, according to my GPS.
So you left that location around 12:07 p.m. Was that because you had finished the job at that particular site?
Correct.
And what were you going to do next after finishing up the job?
Usually at around that time, I'll stop and grab a sandwich and head on to my next call.
Do you recall the route you took leaving the Case Road site to take your lunch and then go to the next place?
I know when I left Case Road, I made my way to Ferris and then down Ferris toward Carl Road.
And when you were at Ferris and Carl, was there anything that caught your attention in that area that day?
Oh, yes.
Will you please tell us about that?
So I was sitting at the intersection of Carl and Ferris. I noticed a car come around the corner, and the person was driving a little erratic, and what appeared to be dancing in his car and singing with music.
And in addition to that car, you said driving erratic. Were there any other vehicles that caught your attention at the intersection?
There was a pickup truck in front of me, and I noticed, after the car had passed and made its way down the road, he started making a U-turn in the intersection.
With respect to this pickup truck, when did that vehicle first catch your attention?
The pickup truck?
Yes.
It wasn't until he was moving in the middle of the intersection.
Okay. So you said that you saw a pickup truck and then another vehicle driving in the intersection that caught your attention. Is this the intersection of Carl and Ferris?
Yes, sir.
So where were you at the intersection when you noticed this other vehicle driving that caught your attention?
Where was I in the van?
Yeah. Were you at the intersection, far away from the
I was
intersection?
just pulling up to the intersection, coming to a stop.
How many cars were in front of you as you approached the intersection of Ferris and Carl?
Just the one,
That being
the pickup truck.
you said there was a car making a turn that caught your attention?
Yes.
What did the car look like?
It was just a little dark-colored car.
And what turn was it making exactly?
So it was making a left off of Carl Road onto Ferris.
What about that turn or what that car was doing caught your attention?
I just noticed the driver moving around pretty erratic, and at one point in time, he took both hands off the wheel and was dancing and moving, and it looked like he was going to come into my vehicle.
Do you recall how big this car was?
It was a small car.
Do you recall the color at all?
It was a dark color. I thought it was gray.
How did that car's size compare to the van that you were driving that afternoon?
It was a lot smaller than my van.
Could you tell, in watching that car go by you, whether your van sat higher at the same level or lower than the little car?
I was a little bit higher looking into the vehicle.
Could you tell whether that little vehicle going by and making the turn had any tinting in the windows?
No, there wasn't no tint on the windows.
Was there any tint to the windows of your van?
No.
And in looking in the car, you described to the jurors a moment ago that it looked like the person inside was dancing. Could you tell what that person looked like at all?
He was African American, and I just remember he had a big afro, and it was pulled back behind him, and that's basically what I remember about him.
And you said there was a moment when his hands weren't on the wheel?
Yes,
How well could you see his hands?
pretty good.
Could you see anything in his hands at all?
No, nothing at all.
Could you see anything inside the car that caught your attention?
No.
Could you see anything on his facial expressions that he was doing that afternoon?
Looked like he was singing. He was moving his mouth.
And did you see any other movement by this driver other than the hands moving and the fact that it looked like he was singing?
I mean, he had body movement with the hands, which correlated to me that he was dancing.
Was anything about this car and the individual driving the car, did anything about that cause you concern?
Yes, I thought he was driving recklessly.
And when did you first notice this vehicle? Did you see it coming from Carl or later?
It was until he come around the front of the pickup truck when I noticed him.
Did you ever make eye contact with the driver of the vehicle?
Yes.
Explain.
About the time he come right past me, he was just looking right at me.
Do you recall what his facial expression was when he looked at you?
He had one hand up in the air like he was singing or something like that toward me. I didn't know for sure.
Could you tell anything about his demeanor?
No, I mean, just whatever he was listening to, he was getting into it.
Was there anything in the hand that he was holding up?
No,
Did you ever see a gun inside that vehicle?
no.
After the little dark car made the turn and went past you, what happened next?
So, both trucks made the U-turn and went back behind me the other way, and I kind of watched them in my mirror to see which way they went. And when the light turned green, I turned on the Carl Road and found the first spot to turn around and followed them back.
Now, you said something interesting there. I heard you say both trucks, and I think just a moment ago you were telling us about a truck in front of you, a little car making the turn. So tell us about, it sounds like there was a second truck there?
So there was a truck behind me also. When I noticed the pickup truck in front of me making the turn, it kind of stopped at the truck behind me. And when I was looking at them, that's when I noticed the lights on the pickup truck, and that's when I realized that it was law enforcement.
When you say notice lights on pickup truck, do you recall whether those lights were illuminated?
For a short time while they was turning around.
Did they continue to remain illuminated?
I don't remember.
Where were those lights that you're describing on the pickup truck that did that turn around?
It seems like I thought they was actually in the taillights of the truck.
And again, you're describing the truck that was in front of you. This is the one that did the U-turn and you noticed lights on the back of it.
Yeah, it was either in the taillights or they might have been in the back window, but I definitely seen lights.
Upon seeing the truck in front of you do the U-turn and stop at the truck behind you, what did you do next?
That's when I tried to figure out what was going on, and I turned on the Carl and made the U-turn and came back.
Why were you interested in what the trucks were doing?
I had a few minutes of time on my hands and wanted to go back and see what was going on.
So how were you able to watch where the trucks went, given that the one in front of you did a U-turn to go the opposite direction?
Well, the one that behind me did the exact same thing, but he just backed up and turned around. So I was watching out of my side view mirror on the van.
Did you continue to drive your van as these trucks were changing their direction?
I was still stopped at the light.
And were you able to see where the trucks went?
Yes.
Where did they go?
In my rear view mirror, they made a right-hand turn onto Ferris Road. Or, I'm sorry, Estates Place. We was on Ferris.
What did you do after you saw the trucks go down Estates Place?
I made a left-hand turn on Carl.
And then what did you do?
I made an immediate left into a apartment complex, I believe, and backed out on the Carl Road and went back to the intersection.
So which way did you have to turn on Carl to get back?
So when I backed out, I would have been going back north on Carl.
Back to where you were.
Yes,
And then so you went to Carl and Ferris?
yes, and then I made a right onto Ferris and went down to Estates and made another right.
After you turned on Estates, what did you see?
I could see the two trucks that I noticed was all the way at the end of the road. So I drove up about as close as I could get, and I pulled over to the right-hand side.
How close could you get to the two trucks at the end of Estates Place?
I was probably within 2 to 3 houses of the actual corner of the road.
Did you see anyone around by the trucks?
When I first pulled up, no, I did not.
Did you see anything going on with the trucks? Like, were they running? Like, what, did you notice anything about the trucks?
The one truck was sitting with the driver's side door open.
Did the other truck have any doors open?
I couldn't see it. It was actually in front of the other one.
Did you see any lights on the trucks?
No.
And you said you stopped about 2 houses up from the end of the intersection of Estates and that end road.
Yes.
Was that end road, was that Case?
Yes.
So after you stopped, did you see anything else besides the two vehicles as you've just described?
While I was sitting there, I noticed I attracted some attention from the house that I was in front of, so I started to back up down the road.
What do you mean by attracted attention? What did you see?
There was just people in the window looking at me, like I didn't know what was going on, so I just backed up and got out of there.
Did you see anything else?
No.
Did you see any law enforcement individuals by the trucks?
At one time, someone come running out to the truck with the door open, and it looked like he might have been using the radio or something.
Did that person who ran up to the door of the truck, were they wearing anything that looked like it was law enforcement related?
It did look like he had a vest on. It might have said police on it.
Did this individual have a weapon?
Yes.
Can you describe it?
Looked like a assault rifle.
How was this person wearing the assault rifle?
It looked like it was just hanging over his neck with a strap or something.
At the time that you're seeing this, could you hear anything?
No.
Did you eventually hear anything?
As I was backing up, I rolled down the window of the truck and I heard sirens coming from every direction I could possibly think of.
How loud was that sound?
The sirens?
Yes.
They was getting louder as I was backing up.
It sounded like there was more than one.
Oh, absolutely.
Now you mentioned you're hearing this, so then what did you do next? Is this about the time that you left that area?
Yes.
So I want to show you a couple things. That you may have seen before. But do you recall, before coming and testifying to the jury this morning, looking at a couple USB drives?
Yes.
Okay. Your Honor, may I approach? May I approach?
Are they marked as an exhibit?
They are marked with exhibit stickers. It's going to be State's Exhibit 34 and State's Exhibit 35.
Any objection?
No objection.
Okay, approach.
Sir, I'm handing you what's been marked for identification purposes as State's Exhibits 34 and 35. Then, those are the USB drives I mentioned a moment ago.
Yes.
And did you review the contents of those USB drives before coming to court today?
Yes.
Thank you. Can you explain to the jurors what you saw on the USB drives?
I saw my truck go by at the scene.
The scene of this incident that you've been testifying to
Yeah,
the
it
jury
was,
about?
it was at the intersection, yes.
And had you seen these videos before?
Yes.
Can you explain to the jurors when you first saw video of the intersection?
When the FBI showed it to me.
Had you seen video of the intersection before the FBI showing it to you?
Yes.
Can you please explain to the jurors the circumstances of when you first saw video of the intersection?
When I first saw the video, it was when it was aired onto the news, and I saw my van go by.
And when did you see that news clip?
I'm not 100% sure. It's been quite a few days.
Was that this year or
Yeah,
earlier?
it was definitely this year.
Okay. And how long of the video clip did you see?
Not much, just enough to see my van there.
And what part of the incident did you see of your van at the intersection?
What do you mean, what part?
Like the beginning when you're approaching the trucks or another part?
When I was approaching and when I was sitting at the intersection, and I believe it even shows me coming back.
Now, is that what you saw in the news or is that what you saw later?
What I saw later.
Okay, and then what you saw later, was that did that show all of the circumstances that you've testified and described to the jury of where you were driving that day?
Yes,
And did the video of the intersections fairly and accurately depict the scene as you saw it that day?
yes,
And with respect to the exhibits that I presented you, States Exhibits 34 and 35, are those fair and accurate copies of the surveillance video clips that you've seen?
yes.
Your Honor, may I publish?
No objection.
You may.
So first, I will start with States Exhibit 34. Yeah, I'm waiting until it's loaded, so I'm not. Okay. Okay. So for the record, the video's loaded and it's at the very beginning, but I'm going to advance in the timestamp to about 9 minutes and 10 seconds. So, sir, I've advanced it to timestamp. It's 9:04 video time, and I'm going to start playing the video. And when I start playing the video, if you could please first identify, or rather identify to the jurors the vehicles you were describing that day, okay? Once we start the video.
So that looks like the first truck at Estates Place pulling out onto Ferris now. And there's my van coming in the site now. And then there's the second truck pulling out behind me. And there's Casey Gooden Jr. passing me, turning on the Estates Place. And there's the officer going back. There's the second one. And there's my van going back to Estates Place.
Okay, I'm going to pause it for a moment. Sir, if I forgot to ask, when you were describing leaving Estates Place, when you heard the sirens, how did you get out of there to go on to your next job site? Do you recall?
So I believe I backed up for a few houses until I found a driveway to turn around in. And then as I was coming out, I thought I had came all the way to the end of the road, but apparently I couldn't get there, so I went down the side street and circled back around.
And once you took the side street, what do you mean by circle back around? Where did you go after you were able to get out of the neighborhood?
I I came back by the intersection one last time before I left the area.
Intersection of,
Estates Place and Carl,
okay, so you had to go down and,
or actually that's Estates and Ferris.
okay. So you were back at the intersection you were at before Ferris
yes.
and Carl?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm gonna advance the video some minutes to about 17:15. $17.16. If you just watch here and tell us whether you recognize any of the vehicles going by.
So that looks like my van coming back in the picture now.
What happened as you passed Estates? Did you notice anything?
I looked down the road and seen all the flashing lights.
Okay. Next, I want to publish with the court's permission, State's Exhibit 35. Thank you.
We have to hit a button on here. Let me show you. Okay.
All right, sir. If you would just turn your attention again to the screen, do you recognize this scene?
Yes.
What is it?
This is back at the intersection of Ferris and Carl.
Keep your
Gonna
voice
walk-
up, so, keep your voice up so everyone can hear.
It's the intersection of Ferris and Carl.
I want to walk you through the video like what we did with the view of Ferris and Estates Place. So I'll advance the video to about 9 minutes. And as the video plays, if you would please identify any vehicles you recognize from the account that you gave the jurors some moments ago about what you saw that day.
So there's the first pickup truck. And that's me pulling up behind it. And then right about now is when I was seeing Goodson's car pass me. And then it looks like the truck's in the intersection turning around. And he stopped to talk to the guy that was behind me. Now he's turning around. And I just made the left on the Carl Road. And there's my truck just coming back around the corner.
Okay, I'm going to pause the video for the record, and then I'm going to move it up to
What number
about,
did you pause it at? 11, 12?
yes, I paused it at 11 minutes and 12 seconds. And I'm going to resume the video at 17 minutes. Again, when I resume the video, sir, same procedure, if you could watch and identify for the jurors any vehicles you recognize.
There's my van again.
Where are you going?
That must have been when I was headed out of the area. Back at the same light we started at.
Stopping the video at 17:51. That's all I have for the video, sir, but I do have some more questions if you just let me take this off the screen. Okay. Sir, that day, after you left the area of States and Case, did you know what happened at the end of the street there?
I did not.
Did you eventually receive information as to what happened there at the corner of Estates Place and Case Road on December 4th, 2020?
I only learned what had happened until I had watched the news that night.
That night of Friday, December 4th, 2020?
Yes.
Upon hearing that news, how did it affect you?
Objection.
Sustain.
Upon hearing the news, did that affect your memory of the incident?
No.
Approach. Overruled, you can answer.
What was the question?
The question was, sir, upon hearing the news of what happened December 4th, 2020 at the intersection there of Estates Place and Carl Road, did that affect your memory of what you had seen that afternoon?
No.
Did you have any sort of impression about it? Did it stick out in your mind?
I mean, it did stick out in my mind because I knew I was there that day.
And after making that connection, did you have contact with law enforcement about what you saw?
No.
Did you eventually have contact with law enforcement about what you saw?
Not until here recently.
So you're saying that from December of 2020 until 2024, nobody contacted you about this?
Correct.
Have you spoken with any witnesses in this case?
No.
Have you spoken with any members or representatives of the defendant, Michael Jason Meade's family?
No.
Have you spoken with Mr. Meade's attorneys?
I haven't spoken personally. I tried to reach out through a series of messages that was unsuccessful.
Series of messages about what you saw?
I didn't say anything about what I saw. I just said I might have information or something.
Can you talk to the jurors about that, about when you came forward within?
You may. That objection will be sustained.
Thank you, Your Honor. May I proceed?
Okay.
Sir, let me ask you a better question. I was asking you about contact with various individuals concerning this case. You're beginning to explain to the jury about that, and I want to ask, who did you reach out to with respect to what you had seen at the intersection on December 4th of 2020?
I think my first instant message was to Mrs. Payne and then another one to her attorney.
When did these occur?
I believe they started a little over a week ago, maybe give or take.
Did you receive any responses from either Ms. Payne or Ms. Payne's attorney?
No.
Did you eventually get a response from somebody concerning what your account was of this incident back on December 4th of 2020?
Mr. Merkel called me and questioned me.
Okay, and when did Mr. Merkel's contacting you, when did that follow in the sequence of events of you contacting Ms. Payne and the family's attorney?
It was the same day I contacted the family's attorney.
But you're saying that you didn't hear from the family or the family's attorney, you just heard from the state's attorney?
Correct.
And after you spoke with the state's attorney, did you speak with any law enforcement about your account of what you saw on December 4th of 2020?
Only when I was interviewed with the FBI.
And what, I want to talk to, you had mentioned sending instant messages. Are you describing using like a phone or social media to contact or make statements about what you saw on the day of the incident?
Yes.
And can you explain just generally any prior statements you made about the incident on social media or a text message?
Meaning what?
Not saying what the statements, but were you posting online about what you saw?
I never posted about what I saw. Well, I made a statement on one of them.
Okay, and what was that, the general nature of that statement? Not exactly what you said, but what was kind of the subject matter of it?
Basically that was me on the video footage and I didn't see a gun.
And then did you have a Facebook account earlier this year?
Yes,
And how long had you had the Facebook account?
a long time.
What is the status of your Facebook account?
I deleted it
Can you explain to the jurors why you deleted your Facebook account?
because I just got random friend requests from people that I didn't know, over 100 friend requests in one day.
When did that occur?
On last Friday, I believe, the day that the media released my name to the public.
Did you want those friend requests or to connect with those people?
No.
Thank you so much, sir. That's all the questions I have for you.
Does council want to approach without stuttering? Gentlemen, we're going to take our morning recess. Do not discuss this case among yourselves. Do not permit anyone to discuss it with you or in your presence. It is your duty not to form or express an opinion on the case until it is finally submitted to you. About 15 minutes.
All rise.
You can step down, but do not talk to anyone about your testimony.
I like the judge said, too.
Jen will take care of it.
I'm gonna have you guys wait for 1 second while I take him.
first person that interviewed you. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that was last Wednesday, wasn't it?
Wednesday or Thursday, I believe.
And the FBI was the second agency that interviewed you, correct?
Correct.
It was the day after Mr. Merkel interviewed you, correct?
Yeah, so that would have Merkel Wednesday and the FBI Thursday.
And the FBI interviewed some other people on Friday, didn't they?
I don't know.
Did they interview your common-law wife, Keitha Javins?
Yes.
Did they interview Jessica Lingo, the dispatcher at Franklin Heating and Cooling?
Yes.
Did they interview Robert Lingo, the owner of Franklin Heating and Cooling?
Yes.
And so those all happened after you were interviewed, correct?
Yes.
And you and I actually spent some time together yesterday, didn't we?
Yes.
And that was in a deposition, wasn't it?
Yes.
And that deposition was a statement that you gave under oath, right?
Yes.
And that oath is the same oath that you took today, right?
Correct.
All right. So what I would like to do, first of all, Mr. Corne, is I would like to draw your attention to the video that Mr. Shaw played for you, and that's the video at Ferris and Carl Road. The reason I want to do this, Mr. Corne, is I want to establish some counter times, some times at which you see the vehicles come on the screen. So if I could ask Ms. Stevens to play the video at Carl and Ferris, and tell me when you see Mr. Meade's vehicle.
Right now.
So it looks like that's Mr. Meade's vehicle, and that came on the frame at about 9 minutes and 18 seconds. You agree with that?
Yeah.
Let's continue on. Tell me when you see your vehicle, Mr. Corne.
Right now.
So it's about 9 minutes and 28 seconds, right?
Yes.
So you're about 10 minutes, or 10 seconds rather, behind Mr. Meade's vehicle, right?
Yes.
And tell me, if you can focus on Mr. Meade's vehicle here, tell me when you see Mr. Meade's brake lights engage.
I can't tell from the video.
Can't see that?
No.
But you're several seconds behind him, right?
Yes.
And we're at the 9 minute and 32 second mark on that video, right?
Yes.
And have you seen, if you can go back maybe 5 seconds, Ms. Stevens? If you can concentrate on where Mr. Goodson is turning left onto Ferris off of Carl. Tell me when you see his vehicle turning.
I can see it now.
And so, do you see Mr. Meade's brake lights engaged?
It does appear that there's a light on the truck.
Right. And would you agree that at 9 minute and 34 second mark that Mr. Goodson's vehicle is roughly beside Mr. Meade's vehicle?
I would say it's still out in front of him a little bit.
Let's roll it just a little bit more. Okay, it's obviously well beyond Mr. Meade's vehicle, right?
Correct.
And it's probably right about your driver's side window at this point, right?
Correct.
And that's at 9 minute and 27 seconds, right?
Correct.
All right. And if you can continue on rolling the video. Tell me when you see your brake lights engage.
I can't tell.
Your vehicle's still moving, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay, continue on. It's stopped right now, though, right?
Right now it is.
9 minute and 47 second mark, your vehicle stopped?
Yes.
So your vehicle, your truck, your van you were in was moving the entire time that Mr. Goodson was making the turn, wasn't it?
Yes.
And you couldn't see the intersection at Ferris and Carl because Mr. Meade's truck was first in line to make a left turn, right?
Correct.
Now, let's talk about when you first saw Mr. Goodson's vehicle. You've admitted that you were interviewed by Mr. Merkel, right?
Yes.
And you're aware that the interview was recorded, sir, right?
Yes.
And isn't it true that during that interview that you told Mr. Merkel that you saw Mr. Goodson's vehicle coming down Carl Road?
Maybe.
You have any doubt that you told him that?
I don't remember exactly what I said.
I would ask Ms. Stevens to go to the 2-minute and 8-second mark of Mr. Merkel's interview. And first of all, I want you to tell us if you recognize any voices.
Carl, and when he made the
Basis?
Well, I mean, he hasn't denied the statement, he said he just can't remember.
I'm refreshing his recollection.
Overruled.
Whose voice was that?
Can you play it again? I didn't even hear.
or Casey Goodson coming down Carl, and when he made the left turn.
So in response to a question of Mr. Merkel, you told him that you saw Mr. Goodson's car coming down Carl Road, didn't you?
Correct.
And that was last Wednesday, right? When he interviewed you.
Correct.
And so the following day, the FBI interviewed you, isn't that correct?
Correct.
And isn't it true that when the FBI interviewed you, you told them that you didn't see Mr. Goodson's vehicle until it came around the nose of Mr. Meade's truck?
Correct.
Is that true?
Yes.
And so in one day, you would agree that your story changed on that fact. True?
It didn't change. I was just unsure at the time I was driving.
But you clearly told Mr. Merkel that you saw Mr. Goodson's vehicle coming down Carl Road, right?
You saw and
I mean, I guess I did.
And the next day, you told the FBI you didn't see Mr. Goodson's vehicle until it came around the nose of Mr. Meade's truck, right?
Well, that's when I judged in on the vehicle.
That's when you judged in. Were you asked by the FBI if you saw the vehicle coming down Carl Road?
I believe so.
And isn't it true that the Detective Art Hughes, had asked that question, you told him no, you didn't see it coming down Carl Road. Isn't that true?
Yes.
And so your story did change between Wednesday and Thursday on that issue, didn't it?
Yes.
And so today, when you testified, you also told this jury that you didn't see Mr. Goodson's car until it came around the nose of Mr. Meade's truck. Isn't that true?
Yes.
So you also talked about on direct examination the reason that your attention was drawn to Mr. Goodson's vehicle, right?
Yes.
And that was because what you perceived to be erratic driving, right?
Correct.
And isn't it true when Mr. Merkel interviewed you over the phone that you told Mr. Merkel that Mr. Goodson's car almost hit your van, right?
Correct.
And did you have to swerve to avoid a collision with Mr. Goodson's car,
No.
Mr. Corne?
No.
Did you have to take any evasive action?
No.
And I would like to go back to the video at Ferris and Carl, and I want you to point out to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury exactly when you feared that Mr. Goodson's car was going to strike your van as you were at that intersection. Go to about the 9:30 mark. That's good. That's your van, right?
Correct.
Tell us when you saw Mr. Goodson's vehicle swerve and almost hit your van?
Right now.
Right there.
Yes,
And you saw it swerve.
yes. He didn't swerve. He was still making the left turn when he had both hands off the wheel.
But you told Mr. Merkel that this vehicle almost swerved and hit your vehicle, right?
He did,
It did.
yes.
And you saw that in the video.
I mean, it's hard to see in the video, yes.
It's hard to see in the video. Could you see it at all?
In this video?
Yes.
No,
You also told Mr. Merkel that, in your judgment, that Mr. Goodson took this corner wide, right?
correct.
And if you took the corner wide, it would mean that you were almost driving off the right side of the road as you're going eastbound on Ferris. Isn't that true?
I mean, not necessarily, it's just a wide turn.
Did you see Mr. Goodson's vehicle leave the paved road?
No,
And so, as a result, there wasn't a wide turn that's shown on this video either, is there?
not on the video, no.
Video doesn't lie, does it?
You just can't see it.
Now, when you were interviewed by Mr. Merkel last Wednesday, you told him that you believed that Mr. Goodson's erratic driving was due to the fact that he only had one hand on the wheel. Isn't that true?
Correct,
And today, when you testified to the jury, you told them that the reason for his erratic driving is he had both hands off the wheel. Isn't that right?
for a split second, he did.
But you didn't tell that to Mr. Merkel last Wednesday, did you?
No,
You just had one hand off the wheel, right? True?
yes,
And if we played this video for you, once again, Mr. Corne, could you tell the jury when it was that you saw Mr. Goodson either have one hand off the wheel or both hands off the wheel? Could you tell us that?
in the video, I cannot.
Again, we're relying on your truthfulness about that, aren't we?
Yes,
Now, Mr. Merkel also asked you about a description of the driver of Mr. Goodson's car, didn't he?
yes,
And isn't it true that Mr. Merkel asked you how the driver was dressed, right?
correct,
And you told Mr. Merkel that you were unable to describe how the driver was dressed, right?
correct,
And that was because that the driver of that vehicle was going the opposite direction from where your van was faced. Isn't that right?
yes,
But you did tell Mr. Merkel that the driver had big hair, right?
yes,
You described it as an afro, right?
yes,
And the following day, when the FBI interviewed you, you told the FBI agent, Kevin Cooper, who interviewed you, that you initially thought the driver of Mr. Goodson's vehicle was a female, didn't you?
for a split second, I thought,
And you said that that person had a ponytail, right?
yes,
Again, your story changed, didn't it? In a day. The description of the driver.
I don't know how.
Did you describe Mr. Goodson as wearing a hooded sweatshirt?
No,
Did you describe Mr. Goodson as wearing a skull cap?
no,
Did you describe Mr. Goodson as having a hoodie up?
no,
Did you describe Mr. Goodson, the driver of the vehicle, as having earbuds in his ears?
no,
Now, you know, we've already talked a little bit about Keitha Javins.
Yes.
She's your significant other, right?
yes,
She was interviewed by the FBI, wasn't she?
yes,
And are you aware that she told the FBI?
Objection. He's going into hearsay, Your Honor.
Councilman, approach real quick.
Excuse me.
You may continue.
Now, Mr. Corne, you testified about your recognition of the two pickup trucks as undercover law enforcement vehicles, right?
Correct.
And those two pickup trucks, they essentially bookended you at the Ferris and Carl intersection, right? One was in front, one was behind.
Correct.
And the FBI asked you how you were able to identify those two vehicles as undercover vehicles, didn't they?
Correct.
And isn't it true that in your interview that you told the FBI agents that because Mr. Meade's vehicle had red and blue lights engaged, that enabled you to identify it as a law enforcement vehicle? True?
Correct.
And in addition to that, you also testified, or you told the FBI, that in addition to the red and blue lights, that Mr. Meade engaged the flashing lights on his taillights, right?
I believe that's where I seen them at first.
And so we had red and blue lights, we had flashing taillights, and you've watched this video several times, right?
Yes.
You watched it on the news, right?
Yes.
You watched it with the FBI, right?
Yes.
You watched it today, right?
Yes.
Isn't it true that there are no lights flashing on Mr. Meade's vehicle when he does the U-turn? Isn't that true?
You can't see them in the video.
You can't see him in the video, just like you can't see the wide turn in the video, right?
Correct.
You can't see him almost hitting you in the vehicle, right?
Correct.
Now, let's talk about not seeing a gun in Mr. Goodson's possession, right? FBI talked to you about that, didn't they?
Yes.
And isn't it true that you told the FBI that you were 99% certain that Mr. Goodson didn't have a gun in his hand? Isn't that true?
Yes.
And isn't it true that you told the FBI, Agent Cooper, when he interviewed you, that Mr. Goodson had his right hand in the air, right?
Yes.
And your deposition was taken yesterday, correct? In my office?
Yes.
Right? And isn't it true during that deposition that you said that it's quite possible that Mr. Meade saw something that you didn't see? Isn't that true?
Sure.
And isn't it true in that deposition that you also said that Mr. Meade did a U-turn in response to Mr. Goodson making a left-hand turn on Ferris Road? Isn't that true?
At the time, I did not know that.
But you know that now, right?
Yes.
And you watched how many news segments about this trial?
Quite a few.
And you're aware that a gun was found by Mr. Goodson's body when he was shot, right?
Yes, sir.
And you're aware that that gun was Mr. Goodson's gun, right?
Yes.
Now, let's talk about following Mr. Meade after he did the U-turn. Isn't it true that you told the FBI that as a result of this U-turn, that you kind of had an adrenaline rush, right?
Yes.
And you wanted to go see some cops kick down some doors, right?
Yes.
You wanted to see some action, right?
Yes.
And so that's why you followed Mr. Meade, isn't it true?
Yes.
So you've already seen the cars turning right onto Estates Place after the U-turns, right?
Yes.
First in line was Mr. Goodson, right?
Yes.
Next in line was Mr. Meade's vehicle, right?
Going down the road, yes.
Yes. Next in line, turning right onto Estates Place, would have been Mr. Rosser's, right?
Yes.
And last in line was yours, right?
Yes.
And you were about 2 minutes behind, weren't you?
Correct.
And the reason you were 2 minutes behind is you made your left-hand turn on Carl, pulled in the apartment complex, pulled back out, and then made a right-hand turn onto Ferris, right?
Correct.
That took some time, right?
Yes.
And so by the time you got down at the end of Estates Place, the two vehicles were already parked, right? The two trucks.
Yes.
And as a result, you pulled down and parked your vehicle to watch, right?
Correct.
And I believe you stated that you then saw someone peering from a window, right? A front picture window?
Yes.
And that person, you watched her testimony, didn't you?
Yes.
And that was Sheila Stanford, right?
Yes.
And she testified that she was filming with her iPhone, right?
Yes.
And you watched her for 10 minutes testify, didn't you?
Give or take.
And that bothered you that she was filming, right?
Yes.
That kind of spooked you that she was filming, right?
Yes.
And so what color of house did Miss Stanford live in?
I don't recall.
What was she wearing that day, Mr. Corne?
I don't recall.
What did you see any cars in her driveway?
I'm pretty sure I was blocking a driveway with a car in it.
Did you see, what kind of car was it?
No.
So this very important fact that spooked you, that this elderly lady was filming this event, you can't give us any details as far as the color of the house, what she was wearing, if there was a car in the driveway, and if there was, what kind of a car, right?
Correct.
That's lost to history, isn't it?
Yes.
You didn't see the shooting, right?
No.
You didn't hear any gunshots, right?
No.
And you testified that as a result of pulling down a state's place, you pulled in front of who you now know as Miss Stanford's house, right?
Yes.
And you watched things unfold, and as things unfolded, you thought it was a good idea to get out of there, right?
Correct.
Because you didn't want to get blocked in, right?
Right.
Mr. Merkel's words, you didn't want to be there all afternoon being tied up with this, right?
Correct.
Okay. And so isn't it true that you told Mr. Merkel that you drove out of State's Place and made a left-hand turn on Ferris, right?
Yes.
And in fact, you actually gave him some details about what you did. You passed 2 law enforcement vehicles as they were going down southbound on the State's Place. Isn't that true? You told him that.
Yes.
And then the FBI interviewed you, didn't they?
Yes.
And the next day, you told the FBI the same story, right?
Yes.
That you were 99% sure that you drove out of State's Place, right?
Yes.
That's the same percentage you used when you said that you were certain that Mr. Goodson didn't have a gun in hand, right?
Correct.
99%, right?
Correct.
And the FBI didn't take your word for it, though, did they?
No.
They actually made you watch the video, right?
Yes.
And you watched the video, didn't you?
Yes.
And that video showed, and that was a video you never saw in court, right?
Correct.
So you couldn't construct your testimony after watching that video, could you?
Correct.
And so as a result, the FBI showed that your 99% verification that you went out on the State's Place was wrong, right?
Yes.
You didn't go out there, right?
Correct.
Bad guess on your part, wasn't it?
Wasn't a guess. I was just trying to recall my thoughts of that day. It's been 3 years ago or 4 years ago.
And you were wrong on that, right?
On that moment, yes.
So let's talk about your social media aptitude. You testified that you watched a number of different news accounts of this trial, right?
Yes.
And you watched Ms. Stanford's testimony, right?
Yes.
And isn't it true, Mr. Corne, that not only did you watch those news accounts, but you posted comments on those news accounts? Isn't that true?
Correct.
And after you posted these comments about these stories, you then took it upon yourself to delete those comments, right?
Correct.
That was intentional on your part, wasn't it?
Yes.
You didn't do it by accident, did you?
No.
You made a conscious choice to delete those news accounts, your postings on the news accounts, right?
Yes.
And you testified that you also had a Facebook account that predated this shooting. Isn't that true?
Correct.
And isn't it true that at your deposition yesterday, that you told us that you posted about this event, the shooting of Mr. Goodson, on December the 18th of 2020? You posted on Facebook about that, right?
Correct.
And before this trial began, you made the conscious decision to delete that posting, right?
Correct.
And no one forced you to do that, right?
Correct.
And when you asked why you did it, you couldn't explain why you did it, right?
Correct.
You just said, I don't know, I deleted it, right?
Yes.
And Tamala Payne, she's Mr. Goodson's mother, right?
Yes.
And you testified on direct examination in part that you had some Facebook encounters with her, right?
Yes.
You followed her on Facebook, didn't you?
Yes.
Could you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury when you started following Miss Payne?
A week and a half ago.
A week and a half ago. And that was after the trial began.
Yes.
And isn't it true that while you were following her, you sent her between 2 and 4 direct messages?
Yes.
And you deleted all of those direct messages to her, right?
Yes.
Again, you made the conscious decision to do that, right?
Yes.
You didn't do it by accident, right?
No.
It wasn't unintentional, was it?
No.
Instead, you purposely deleted those contacts. Isn't that true?
Yes.
Now, according to her engagement page, and we talked about her engagement page yesterday in your deposition, right?
Yes.
Isn't it true that on her Facebook engagement page that you earned 116 points engaging her between January the 28th and February the 3rd? Isn't that true?
Objection.
Basis?
Foundation, he's not a Facebook representative.
If he knows,
Answer the question.
overruled.
Yes.
116 points, right?
Yes.
And a matter of fact, we were able to show you yesterday that only one person had more engagements with her during that 6-day period than you. Isn't that true?
Objection.
Basis?
Again, foundation, he is not a Facebook keeper of records. He can't speak to Facebook records.
Overruled if he knows.
Answer the question.
Yes.
And so only one person engaged her more in that 6-day period than you,
Yes.
right? Now, you also commented on some of her postings, right?
Yes.
You maybe would give a thumbs up or a like, right?
Yes.
Or an emoji about caring about a posting that she made, right?
Yes.
Any other reactions that you had to her postings?
Not that I recall.
And you deleted all of these comments, though, didn't you?
Yes.
You deleted all of these postings, didn't you?
Yes.
And when the FBI interviewed you last Thursday, Mr. Corne, did you tell the FBI that you had a Facebook page?
No.
Did you tell the FBI about your engagement with Tamala Payne on Facebook?
No.
Did you tell the FBI that you were in second place earning 116 engagement points with Miss Payne?
No.
Did you tell the FBI that you had deleted the December 18, 2020 posting about this event?
No.
And did you tell the FBI that you deleted your comments, your responses to news accounts that you watched about this trial?
No.
And at your deposition yesterday, you acknowledged you should have done that, right?
Probably should have.
But you didn't, right?
Correct.
You agreed that you should have told the FBI about your deletion of Facebook postings about this case, right?
Yes.
And did the FBI warn you, Mr. Corne, about lying to a federal law enforcement officer before your interview started with them?
Yes.
And what did they tell you the consequence was if you lied to a federal law enforcement officer?
Punishable by jail time.
And isn't it true that after you were interviewed, Keitha Javins was interviewed, Robert Lingo was interviewed, and Jessica Lingo were all interviewed, that you and Keitha decided to delete your Facebook page?
Correct.
All the postings, right?
Yes.
And you stated to Mr. Shaw that the reason you did that is you had a large number of friend requests as a result of you coming forward. Isn't that right?
Correct.
And you could have always ignored those people, right?
Yes.
You didn't have to delete your Facebook, right?
I felt it was the safest thing to do at the time.
The safest thing to do after everyone was interviewed by the FBI, right? After not telling the FBI about your Facebook relationship with Miss Payne, right?
Yes.
Have a moment, Your Honor.
Yeah.
No further questions.
Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Corne. I want to circle back to when Mr. Nolder was asking you about the video clips displayed up there on the screen. He was asking you about various details that you could see here today looking at the video clip. Now, could you explain to the jurors whether you could see more in person on December 4th, 2020 versus what was visible in the video
Oh,
clips?
absolutely. The video was so far away from the intersection that I could barely see taillights, if any, on the vehicles. In person, I looked right into their faces.
Thank you. And were there things in the video obstructing the view of Mr. Goodson's vehicle that weren't obstructing your view of the vehicle that day?
Yes. For one, my van was obstructing what I seen, in the video, and then there looked to appear to be a brick wall or something between us.
Mr. Nolder was asking you about various details that you had recounted in the recent conversations you've had with Mr. Merkel and law enforcement about what you saw back in 2020. Did you ever change your account of when exactly you saw?
Overruled. Let him finish the question.
Thank you. Did you ever change your account of when you were actually able to see Mr. Goodson and what he was doing in his vehicle, the timing of when you saw that?
Objection.
Overruled. You can answer.
Can you say that again?
You testified earlier to a particular time of when you were actually able to look inside the dark vehicle and see the driver, who you later learned to be Mr. Goodson, correct?
Correct.
Did you ever, in recounting various times here in court and then prior with the interviews, did you ever change or give a different time of when you were able to look and see Mr. Goodson inside his vehicle?
I don't believe so.
And when was that time again when you were able to look and see Mr. Goodson inside his vehicle?
I mean, I could see pretty clearly inside the vehicle from the moment he come around the front of the pickup truck.
Okay, and that's what I was getting at. When exactly, or rather, where exactly the car was in the intersection when you were able to notice what was going inside the vehicle?
Correct. That's when I focused in on the driver of the vehicle, is about the time he come around the front of the truck. And then as he got closer, I was paying attention the whole way. He had my full attention.
And have you ever indicated to anybody at any time whether you could or recall what Mr. Goodson was wearing that day? Was that a detail that you've ever tried to recount to anybody?
No, I couldn't recall what he was wearing that day.
Certain details were more important. Is it true that certain details were?
Let him finish his question.
Let me rephrase, Your Honor, if that's okay. Mr. Corne, would you explain whether certain details of what you saw that day stood out more than other details of that day?
Correct.
And can you explain why?
Because it's what had my attention that day at that moment, was the individual himself, not what he was wearing or what he was driving. I was focused on him and him only, really.
And again, why were you focused on Mr. Goodson and his vehicle as he made the turn?
I was just watching his movements and his dancing as he was coming around the corner and getting closer to me.
Now, Mr. Nolder asked you, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit in the incident where Mr. Nolder was asking you about the house that you parked by on Estates. When you got down there, the trucks are there at the end of the street, and you noticed some individuals in the window, whom I believe you indicated in your testimony you believe one of those people was Miss Staniford, correct?
Correct.
Mr. Nolder was asking, do you remember the color of the house? Do you remember cars in the driveway, et cetera? Were those details, did any of those details strike you as important that day?
No.
Mr. Nolder also asked you about your prior statements regarding your itinerary of leaving estates once you heard all the sirens and you decided that you weren't going to stick around any longer. And you said that before watching the video, you said you were 99% certain that you took estates to leave. Do you remember talking about that?
Correct.
Now, did you have to take estates for at least part of your itinerary to exit the neighborhood?
Yes.
Mr. Nolder also discussed with you news accounts. You had posted, I understand, on stories online, comments regarding this case, correct?
I don't remember which one it was, but yes, I posted something online on one of the news feeds.
And were you posting something that contradicts your testimony today?
No.
You also were asked about a post that you put in your Facebook profile on December 18th, 2020. Do you remember those questions?
Yes.
And was the posting, do you remember what you posted back on December 18th of 2020 regarding this incident?
It was just pretty much going over what I had seen at the scene, and and when I posted it, I think I attached a hashtag or something to the post, so I didn't know if it was going to be attached to anything, but it was basically just throwing up a flag, to try to let somebody know that I was there, and I might have seen it, some of it.
And did you provide details in that prior statement as to what you saw?
A little bit.
Do any of those details that you had, or did any of the details that you posted back in December 18th of 2020 contradict your testimony today?
No.
Next, you were asked about reaching out to Ms. Payne, Tamala Payne, Mr. Goodson's mother, via social media. Do you recall those questions?
Yes.
Did Ms. Payne ever respond to any of your communications?
No.
Mr. Nolder also asked you about Facebook and talking to the FBI. Now, did the FBI ever ask you in particular about your social media activity or whether you were making comments about this incident online?
No.
You were also asked about engagement points and, measurements, I guess, of your activity with respect to Ms. Payne. Did you even know anything about that particular measurement?
I did not know about the measurement, but I know how the measurement became. It was because I had to click on her profile, Ms. Payne's profile, to get to her instant messenger to see if she ever acknowledged my message.
Now, you had indicated that you weren't sure, why you started taking down various comments and responses to articles about the testimony of this case. In doing that, were you ever trying to hide any information about the case?
I had second thoughts about being involved with the case.
And second thoughts how? Can you please explain to the jurors second thoughts as in you wanted to be more or less involved?
I wanted to be less involved. I didn't want to be in the public eye like I am now.
Why?
I don't know. This is a big deal, a high-profile case, and I didn't want it to come to this.
Do you have any sort of agenda as to why you ultimately decided to come forward and try to make contact with law enforcement about what you saw that day?
I had a last-minute decision and just felt like it was the right thing to do.
Why?
I just felt like somebody needed to hear what I saw and had to say.
Just a couple more details regarding your testimony. With respect to, where you were that day, you had indicated to the jurors that you were at a job site on Case, and then the intersection, and then back.
Objection, this is beyond cross-examination.
Overruled.
And again, could you clarify to the jurors that when you were back in the area of Miss Staniford's house, whether you saw anything occurring at that house on the corner of Estates Place and Case Road?
I didn't see anything occurring. When I pulled up and actually come to a stop and pulled over, the driver's side door of the pickup truck was open, and after a few seconds or so, someone did run to the pickup truck, and it looked like they might have been calling or using the radio or something like that. They was standing beside the pickup.
And since you've made contact with Mr. Merkel and got involved in those interviews that you've discussed and made multiple statements regarding this incident, have you always been trying to be as accurate as possible in recounting?
Basis?
Self-serving.
Sustained. Sustained.
Again, sir, and with respect to the interviews and multiple statements that you have recently made after coming forward and making contact with Mr. Merkel, did you have any agenda or purpose
Objection, ask and answer.
Overruled.
with respect to the statements that you've been making?
Say that again?
Did you have any sort of agenda, other motive in the course of these different interviews that you've had from Mr. Merkel forward until today, and giving these statements about your recollection of what happened on December 4th of 2020?
No.
Thank you, that's all I have.
Any questions as a result of those questions?
Mr. Corne, as I understand your motivation for coming forward is you wanted to do the right thing, right?
Correct.
Is the right thing deleting your posts on the news accounts? Is that the right thing to do?
No.
Is the right thing to do to delete your Facebook account after you've been interviewed by the FBI?
I mean, I felt it was the right thing
Yes
to
or no?
do.
Was it the right thing to do, yes or no?
No.
Let's talk about your leaving Estates Place after you were down in front of Miss Staniford's house. I'm a bit confused now. Mr. Shaw said you took Estates Place part of the way out to leave the neighborhood, right?
Correct.
But you didn't tell that to Mr. Merkel, did you? You told him that you took Estates Place all the way to Ferris and made a left-hand turn on Ferris. Isn't that true?
Correct.
Isn't it true that you told the FBI the same thing? You took Estates Place all the way to Ferris and made a left-hand turn to get out there.
Correct.
That wasn't right, right?
Correct.
We know it wasn't right because the video documents that you didn't do that. Isn't that right?
Yes.
And Mr. Shaw asked you if you changed any of your testimony or your observations about what you saw inside Mr. Goodson's car. Do you remember when he asked you that?
Yes.
Isn't it true that you said that Mr. Goodson had one hand on the wheel? You saw him with one hand on the wheel, right?
Yes.
Objection.
Overruled.
Isn't it true that your testimony today was, at a time, he had both hands off the wheel? Isn't
For,
that true?
for a split second, yes.
So it did change, didn't it?
Yes.
And how about the clothing? Mr. Shaw asked you if you were unable to identify any of the clothing the driver, Mr. Goodson, was wearing. Remember that line of questions?
Yes.
And isn't it true, Mr. Corne, that the reason you couldn't recall that was because it wasn't on any of the news accounts? Isn't that true?
No.
You didn't have the advantage of looking at those news accounts and understanding what type of clothing Mr. Goodson was wearing when he was driving that car. Isn't that true?
Objection.
Sustain.
And because you intentionally deleted postings, Facebook, all of those comments, we have to rely on you, your word, as to what you wrote back in December of 2020. Isn't that true?
Correct.
There's no record to prove you wrong, is it?
No.
And we talked about this December 18th, 2020 posting at your deposition yesterday, didn't we?
Yes.
And I asked you verbatim, what was your post? How did it read? Do you remember when I asked you that question?
I don't recall.
Would you like to see your deposition transcript that Ms. Cutter worked long into the night to create?
No.
And isn't it true that in response, you said, it said I was there. I was behind Jason Meade. I saw the victim come by and said I followed down the street. I didn't see anything. That's what you wrote, right?
Correct.
But again, we're relying on your veracity as to what those statements are, because there's no record of it, because you took the necessary steps to delete them, right?
Yes.
May I have a moment, Your Honor?
You may.
And Mr. Corne, in the news accounts that you watched, I think that you told us yesterday you primarily watched Channel 6 News, right?
Correct.
And that on the news accounts that you watched, some of those would have included Mr. Meade's testimony, right?
Correct.
You watched him testify, right?
Very little bit, yes.
No further questions.
All right, you can step down.
Your Honor, we have one more witness, but he will not be here until.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a early lunch. Do not discuss this case among yourselves. Do not permit anyone to discuss it with you or in your presence. It is your duty not to form or express an opinion on the case until it is finally submitted to you. We'll start back up with the 1:15 and start back up at 1:30.
All rise.